And we're back with the program. It's Gerald Glassford coming right back at you here from the Pop Culture Cosmos. We truly appreciate everyone out there listening to all of our great shows around the world on radio stations 7 days a week. And, of course, wherever you get your podcasts. Speaking of podcasts, there's an outstanding podcast that, maybe for him, and maybe the fact he might have lost listeners because of it, I, unfortunately, graced in the not-too-distant past. It is a great show nonetheless. Maybe even my episode, because it has another great guest on it. Not me, but it is the PVDCast. Please, you got to go ahead and check out everything that is, just a part of this show when it concerns the PVDCast. In fact, Jeff Dwoskin, who I recently interviewed, and it was a great interview, much better guest than I was, but still, maybe go ahead and check out that episode. He's got over 260 episodes in the bank. And if you just go to pvdcast.com, you can see the entire list. You can go ahead and play the entire list or wherever you get your podcasts. I want to go ahead and wish him just an awesome and congratulations on an 8th anniversary for you. So yes. 8 years of the PVDcast, and give him a big congratulations. It is John Orlando. And John, thanks for coming by on the show today. There is very few out there better to talk about the pro wrestling genre than you, my friend.
That's true. Thank you very much, by the way, for the kind words. I can't believe that it's gone by like that. 8 years. I started in 2012, December 12th of 2012, and I swear, people, that was sheerly by accident. It was not a gimmick. I didn't plan it that way. It just happened. In fact, it took me a couple of months, like February and March, and then I'm like, oh, wait, 12. I didn't even pick up on it. I was so clueless, but it's been great. It's been fun. I'm looking forward to the next 8 years and beyond, and thanks to everybody who's ever checked out an episode or was a guest or told some folks about it or helped me out or whatever. Thank you very, very much. I really mean it from the bottom of my heart. I appreciate it so much.
Well, again, congratulations. Anybody who has done this for such a long period of time, like you and I have, 8 years is a long time in the industry because we see these shows come and go. I mean, that's the thing with podcasts. Yes, I said a joke before we went on the air. There are about 2 million roughly podcasts that have bbeen created out there, but over half, they're gone by episode 10. I think there's some sort of weird, wacky ratio of some absurd number of podcasts that are out there that fail because they don't even get to episode 10 because they just don't have what it takes or just don't want to go ahead and pursue it. And for you to pursue it so long, 8 years later, it's a credit to you, and it's also a credit to everything that you're about, and also the listeners out there checking out each and every episode and obviously supporting you in the way that they can.
Yeah, and I couldn't say it any better than that, Gerald. It's been great. And look, I think you can also agree, probably the early episodes, you're like, those are rough,
I think that's every show, my friend. I think you go ahead. Back in 2016, when I started the Pop Culture Cosmos, I'm like, or back when I started podcasting in 2009, that's really, for me, cringeworthy. So, you know what? We all come from somewhere. We all come from a beginning. We all learn the kinks and nuances of the podcasting genre when it comes, in our ways as far as the experience that we learned. So, you know what? We're here now. We're providing good podcasts. And obviously, if they listen to your show, the PVDcast, they will definitely hear an awesome podcast based on and a lot dealing with professional wrestling. So I want to hear your thoughts on this, my friend. And that's why one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on here was All Elite Wrestling. Recently, they've made news once again because they're approaching the 1 million viewer mark again in the ratings. This is something that they did originally and have kind of like taken peeks at it every now and then since their big opening, which we knew there wouldn't be, there would be a fascination and some people would turn on to something else, or maybe go back to NXT or anything like that. At this point in time, they're creeping back towards the million viewer mark. They're obviously ending 2021 on a very strong note, getting their recent show, Winter is Coming, and not only changing into another world championship, into another world champion with Kenny Omega and going with him, who's now running all over organizations all over the world, including Impact and AAA, as he proved last night in Triple Mania as we talk about this. but you got Sting that has made his return to TNT in 20 years. To me, it's an exciting time for fans of All Elite Wrestling, and for me, who was, I guess, I want to say later on the board, later on the train, because I had my doubts because of some of the roster I didn't think was made up of the best quality individuals there. I think the future is now much brighter. I think they've not fallen into many of the same tropes that these other previous organizations that have tried to compete with the WWE has. I think the future is very bright for AEW.
I think the future is bright for them as well. I fear, though, that they have to get a little more consistent in storylines and booking, Gerald.
Oh, yeah,
I think
that's agreed.
They present something and you're like, oh, okay, I'm interested in that. And then several weeks go by before they come back to it. And I think that you lose viewers when you do that. They've lost me on some things. I do believe the future is bright. I think that Sting certainly does have a role in the company. I don't want to see Sting wrestle. I don't. I hope that they're not going to try that. I mean, he has the bad neck. I don't see how they could do that. He has a role. The question is, they're going to have to find a role and make sure that he fits in that role. I don't know, like, for an example, if you had him as a authority figure, the general manager or whatever of Dynamite, I don't know if that would work. I don't know if that would be the mold for him. I could see him being more of like a mentor to some of the younger individuals on the roster. But then you kind of think about, well, you got Arn Anderson doing kind of a similar role. Tully Blanchard
and Jake Roberts.
Yeah. So I think they have to find a fit for him. They have to find somewhere where he's going to, for lack of a better term, and pun may be intended, make an impact within the storylines that they have, that they can work with. I am a big fan of this idea of Kenny Omega being the belt collector. I think that's a great idea.
Because this is not the first time that's happened before, where we had someone go ahead. And to me, I'm going to be honest with you, I'm always intrigued. Like the last one, I think, was Austin Aries that tried the belt collecting thing, the belt collecting gimmick, where they go ahead to different organizations and try to collect all their belts. I like the gimmick personally because I think it lends credibility to not only that individual, in this case, Kenny Omega, but also the organizations that they're working with. And right now, to me, if I'm running ROH, if I'm running MLW, if I'm running Impact, AAA, New Japan, anybody out there that's not named WWE, it is in my best interest to hop on board with AEW. Because as we saw with the ratings on Access TV that skyrocketed the week after Kenny Omega won just by his appearance, and mind you, it's not, how much it'll hold, we'll have to wait and see. Mm-hmm. It's in their best interest, at least short term, to work with AEW.
And I agree. And I think that, when you look around at some of these maybe mid-level, like as you mentioned, Ring of Honor, MLW, I think it behooves them to pair up because they're getting the rub. They're getting that exposure indirectly from doing this storyline with Kenny Omega. And I agree with you with the belt collector idea. I thought back to Ultimo Dragon. I mean, he showed up with all those titles in WCW, and that was something cool. That was something that did give legitimacy to those titles and to Ultimo Dragon. So, and I think that Kenny Omega needs this because let's just be honest, he hasn't booked himself well, or whoever's in charge, I don't know. He has not been booked well in AEW.
100% agree.
Yeah, I mean, I go back to watching his matches against Okada and against Jericho in New Japan, and yeah, he is the big bout machine. And then he came to AEW, and I understand you don't want to be Jerry Lawler and put the belt on you. I get you, I get that, but he was booked poorly, just so poorly that
because he's working with his friends, and sometimes when you're working with your friends, it's like, let's say you and I are running AEW, but and I had just come off those matches. But John, I said, John, I want to go ahead and give you the rub. I want you to go ahead and do it. And then he said, someone else get the spotlight. I'm okay. I'm good. It got to the point where Kenny Omega was becoming irrelevant, even as a tag team champion, was becoming irrelevant, and people were wondering why he was that good after all. A lot of people questioning it. I'm not talking about Jim Cornette because that's another story altogether. But, Kenny Omega, people wondering why is he this 7-star guy or anything like that. Now people are starting to see him again because They did this at the last possible moment he could go ahead and recapture that glory. Because if this kept on going, my friend, I don't think Kenny Omega would have ever regained it if he didn't start doing it now.
I agree. I mean, and honestly, Gerald, I think they should have started a couple of months ago. But nonetheless, I agree with you. I think that they have to make that pivot, allow him to become the heel, allow him to do this storyline and get some momentum back, because I totally agree. I think that he was becoming irrelevant. He was becoming a minor footnote. I honestly think, too, that whole tag team, I thought Adam Page, I like Adam Page a lot. And I feel like that whole storyline damaged Adam Page, too. So overall, I think it damaged both of them. So we will see where this leads in 2021. But I'm optimistic that, Omega, I mean, you could just think of all the dream matches he could have. If he goes to Impact, he could battle Eddie Edwards. If he goes to randomly, I'll just say, if he shows up in Ring of Honor, then he, could take on the Jay Lethals or MLW and be down there and take on Hammerstone. Like, that would be some great matches. And as like an armchair booker, it's going to make a lot of people happy.
And what I wanted to ask you this is something that I asked originally to my good friend Ryan John Tombasco of Bar Talk podcast. I wanted to ask you this, and that is with Kenny Omega and AEW, by doing this, obviously we see the benefits for Impact. AEW comes knocking on the door, or Kenny Omega talks to and puts Don Callis on the phone and says, hey, I want to go ahead and do this angle. Or he goes to AAA and says, yeah, I've got the AAA title, but I want to go ahead and start this deal. They're all in the position of like, yeah, bring it on. Even ROH and MLW, if they get those calls, they're going to probably say, at this point in time, we've got some struggling organizations. We're kind of on the mend. Obviously, with COVID destroying a lot of what we had built on and the success, what we had built on, that's gone away. So we need something to help pick us up. This is going to get us back into the limelight. That's great. What is in it for AEW? That's what I want to know. That's something that's a harder question to answer. And I'm not sure I have that answer, but it makes, obviously, the television viewer more interesting. Obviously, they're getting the benefit from the rub that they were able to not only increase the viewers, but substantially increase the number of viewers the next week after Winter's Coming. But really, when it comes down to it, long term, what is in the benefit for AEW as an organization, not Kenny Omega?
And that is the $1 million question. I don't know, because I think that the only answer that I have to that, Gerald, is, again, building out a little bit more of that audience. But at this point, due to a variety of different reasons and different factors, are you really built? Like, for an example, are you getting like 500 fans from Ring of Honor? Are you getting a couple hundred from MLW? Instead of, if this was a typical 2020 where you have people going to shows and that, you could grab more. So I don't know if even expanding that audience, they're doing it as much as they would be if the circumstances were different. I don't know. I think that it is a puzzling question to ponder, because especially when you have the network TV deal, you have a billionaire or a son that is a billionaire to a billionaire. I don't know. I can't answer that question.
It's a difficult one to answer. It's tough. It is really tough. And because of the fact that AEW has its niche audience, it was, I don't want to say flatlining, but it was in right around 750, 800,000 viewers. Obviously, they built up Winter is Coming to be something big, and it did hit up to 900, a little bit over 900,000 viewers. But Kenny Omega winning the belt and then that whole scenario seems to have paid off. And maybe that's something that they foresaw happening, was the buzz and the rub from that, bringing them up to even farther. Maybe they felt that they've reached a point, and maybe they felt they've needed something beyond that. And maybe what they see here is the fact that if they reach out to these smaller organizations and build something forward with them as far as a working arrangement, even with New Japan overseas, who was also here in the States as well with their own developmental program, maybe that's something that they want to work out long term. Maybe that they think it's for their future benefit, not only as far as talent trading, but hopefully that people can think, hey, there's something in the mix. Because as you and I remember, and I'm thinking, and I'm saying this off the top of my head, I'm thinking about it, Remember, WCW was at its best not when it had the main events of the old standard Hogan versus Hall versus Nash or NWO and all that. That was fine. That was great, and obviously created a lot of stir and sold a lot of T-shirts, including myself. But the real part of the show for me was the earlier parts of the show where they talked about all the different individuals coming from Mexico, from Japan, coming in from other organizations, and them acknowledging it on the air. Like previously, it was something that was sort of taboo. So maybe that's going to go ahead and garner interest because from a worldwide standpoint, I can see it making sense bringing in the Japanese contingent and also bringing the Mexican contingent from there with AAA and New Japan. But bringing in these smaller organizations, I just see it as maybe fresh faces to make it even brighter for people to see. That's the only thing I can think of is just bringing fresh faces to the AEW scene.
See, I think that if we're going to take a look at that idea, bringing in fresh faces, which I'm all for, I think that really, if AEW was smart, maybe start building like the old St. Louis territory, where the St. Louis territory, really wasn't a territory. It was just a city, and Muchnick booked everyone and had 10 like awesome over-the-top matches. You would have, David Von Erich versus Harley Race is the main event, but the next match after that was like Bruno Sammartino against, and they just pulled everybody from all the different promotions to.
You would have Harley Race, Bruiser Brody, and a ton of big name wrestlers.
Oh yeah, they had literally almost everybody pass through Missouri at 120. They had a very small crew that were based there, like Rip Hawk and Pat O'Connor, but they build these super cards, for lack of a better a word, but it was every single month in St. Louis. And I think, if you want to do something different, I think that would be the way to do it. Especially if, I don't know what pay-per-view numbers have been. I haven't looked that up in a very long time. So I have no idea how AEW is doing with their pay-per-view buys. But that would be a surefire way to maybe, stoke the interest of many wrestling fans, is to have these kind of super cards. But again, going back to the original question, I don't know what they gain from this.
Well, let me ask you this. Because you and I aren't really 100% sure. We can't really put our, this is something that in a board meeting when these things are discussed, I know Cody's there and I know the Young Bucks are there. And I know obviously Kenny Omega, when this is brought up with Tony Khan and all that, when they discuss going out to all these different organizations and they give you those reasons why, we can't figure out what were those definitive reasons. But the results, if they are definitive and they are continuing to go in the favor of AEW, then there's really not much to argue about. The question I have for you is in 2021, what is the future for AEW? Because they're now, as a lot of people have talked about, a tenth of a point behind, I believe, what the ratings are for Raw. They're closing in. It's not to the point where they have to they're breathing down Raw's neck, but it's still a tenth of a point. It's still a long ways away. We're still talking about 600, 700, 800,000 viewers away from what Raw does on a normal basis. What I want to ask you is this a possibility on the horizon? Do you see at some point matching or maybe even getting close to what Raw does on a regular basis?
Well, I think that AEW very well could touch the same threshold as Monday Night Raw, especially if things continue to be presented on Raw the way that they are. I think that, you and I said it a few weeks ago when you were on the PVDcast, there's problems with wrestling. We know that, there are some problems, and there's so many to name. And that goes for the WWE, that goes for Impact, that goes for AEW, et cetera, et cetera. If the WWE continues to go the way that they're going with Raw, I could see that maybe theoretically in 2021, AEW could catch up to them, especially if they could they have Kenny Omega, they have, especially with this storyline, they have a great amount of momentum. They need two more things. I think if they can get two more hot programs, now you got 3 hot programs, and if you keep the consistency in the booking and you keep the consistency in those 3 storylines, I could see them maybe starting to move that needle up some.
If you could give something for Cody, because Cody is a primetime star. Yes. He always has been. I've always said that for years, is that was on the cusp of greatness always in the WWE and just was never given that full shine or that full confidence. But you could clearly see that the kid had a future at that point in time. Well, now he's a grown man. Now he's one of the top stars in AEW. But I really don't think that he has given himself that one thing to get him over, because I see him at a level where he is here and everybody else that he's going against is here. So it's really hard to get that credibility factor going forward. But if you can find a storyline, I'm not necessarily saying, go ahead and recreate circa Stone Cold Steve Austin circa 1997. Because if you could do that, my gosh, you do have exactly everything that you're talking about, John. But if you can create a storyline that's compelling for him, because he is still a very much credible and believable individual, I think that's the key going forward. I think he is what you do for him or what he does for him as himself, and not necessarily saying it on an egotistical note. I'm just saying as far as from a business standpoint, what he can do for his character going forward, I think is a key for the company's ultimate long-term success at that level that you're talking about. I think he is one of those missing pieces.
Agreed. And the other missing piece they have right there, and I feel over the last few months have diluted him, and that's MJF.
Yeah.
I mean, he is fantastic. Yeah. There is no one better at being that jerk heel than MJF right now.
He's a future professional wrestling.
He is. And that would be your third person. So if you run with Omega and you run with Cody and you run with MJF and build a compelling storyline for those three individuals, I think that you will start getting more viewers. You'll get people who are interested. But here's a fine example, I feel, Gerald. I feel like they had that for just a small fraction when they had Cody and Lance Archer and that feud. I felt like they had that. I'm like, yes, here we go. This is going to be the feud that's going to take off. And it was 3-4 weeks, and then it was kind of over. Yeah, and it kind of whimpered. It didn't even go out with a bang. It kind of.
Well, let me ask you this: did they do the Cody MJF? Did they do the Cody and MJF angle too early? If they'd have done it, let's say in 2021, could that be the thing? Because that was beautifully written, beautifully done, beautifully executed, with the right answer. That was done in the right way, with MJF overcoming, especially as the young up and coming future of this business. He was given the nod ultimately over Cody. I think it was done a little bit too early. I think that's something they should have held off until a time like right now. Get that underway right now, and that could have been something that had taken off. Because like you said, you've got two of those three cornerstones right there.
Yeah, that feud could have. To be honest, Gerald, I don't know. I don't have an opinion on Cody versus MJF. I think that at the time, I don't know. I don't know if waiting would have been the answer for that. I think that personally, I think they should have had a longer program. If you were going to start that program, it needed to be longer. It needed to be almost a full calendar year. I feel like that. But nonetheless, if you can get those two, and I don't understand why MJF's involved in this whole inner circle business. I don't understand. He doesn't need to be with a group. He does need Wardlow. I think he definitely needs to have that guy as his heavy.
Is it ultimately to do the inevitable MJF versus Chris Jericho match again in a higher platform PVV type format?
I'm sure that's what they're going for. I am sure that's what they're going for, but
that doesn't excite you.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't, because look, I'm old school, and I like the idea that MJF is not afraid to be a heel in the modern era. He's said it in interviews. He wants everybody to leave the arena and hate his guts, and that's something we haven't seen in a very long time. So it's refreshing. So putting him into this feud with Jericho, which, let's be honest, that's probably going to turn MJF face. Don't you think? I mean, or do you think Jericho's going to end up being the face? I mean,
he's already on that bridge of being a face anyways, because so many fans are endeared to his character because he's just so evil. You got to love him. He reminds me and reminds everybody else, and I'm sure he reminds you of a young Roddy Piper when he was going and flaming and just enraging fans of all over the Los Angeles Olympic Auditorium in the Los Angeles area. And then going forward to when he was in Mid-South, and then obviously his future with then as far as WCW, and then went to WWE or WWF at that time.
Mhm.
I see a definite correlation to him, because very rarely do you have an individual with his talents at that young of age.
Oh yeah, agreed. So I don't, I hope that he doesn't turn face and then therefore we go full baby face. I don't see that happening.
Can't.
I don't see that happening at all. And I think too, the other thing, if you get those, going back to our original topic here, if you have those three that are, off, you have Omega, you have Cody, and you have MJF off, and they're involved in very good storylines, then they need to start also building the other storylines, because it takes the mid card, it takes the opening match to make everything good,
Yeah.
And I think that, the one thing I think that is sadly missing in modern wrestling is this idea of you can have opening matches where it could be a squash and it could be 5 minutes to get a guy over. Every match doesn't have to be 25 minutes.
Yeah.
And I think that unfortunately AEW kind of falls into that.
Well, it doesn't have to be competitive.
Right. Yes. Agreed. And I think that even goes for Raw. I mean, we see that on Raw and SmackDown too, that there's not, these quick matches to get a monster over.
No jobbers anymore. There are no jobbers.
No, and I think that that's something that needs to happen. How else can you build somebody?
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. Right? Preaching to the choir right here, I'll tell you. Once again, it's John Orlando. You got to go ahead and check out his awesome show, the PVDcast, at the PVDcast.com or the PVDcast on Facebook. 8 great years, and congratulations again on 8 great years of awesome podcasts. There's no better place to go for your wrestling podcast than the PVDcast. But before we head on out, I gave it the hard pitch on why people need to check out the PVDcast. I need to hear from you, my friend, on why the PVDcast is the best place to go for wrestling fans.
Well, because, I have been doing independent professional wrestling in the state of Ohio for 18 years, since 2002. I have a ton of stories that I could share and sometimes do share on the PVDcast. I do have my resident pro wrestling pundits that come on 4 times a year whenever the WWE has their big pay-per-views, WrestleMania, the Royal Rumble, SummerSlam, it's a Survivor Series. And we sit down and we dissect them, we preview them, we review them, we joke about them, we have a good time, and I appreciate those guys helping out. And you're getting just basically a long-term fan. I've been watching wrestling since 1985 and absorbing it all. I'd watch it all. AWA, NWA, WWF, World Class, no matter what it was. If it was on TV, I was watching it. As a matter of fact, Gerald, I claim that the best thing that ever happened to my family was when we got a VCR. Because then I could take, because my parents were old school. They were, what are you doing? It's Saturday morning. It's nice outside. Get out and play. But Mom, I want to watch Get Out and Play. You know what? After the VCR, I could just throw a tape in and watch it later at night. So,
I used to remember going to the Japanese grocery stores and actually in the tape stores too. They would have a section devoted to some of the All Japan and New Japan at that point in time in the 90s and 80s at that point in time, 80s and 90s. And I remember going ahead and buying them and so excited to see the latest episode of All Japan Wrestling or New Japan Wrestling. And I was so thrilled to go ahead and get that. And then like you, finding a channel for me that was not on the basic channels, but turning it with my old black and white TV, trying to see if I could find the clicker to the old, I think it's a UHF stations, channel 56 in Orange County. Shout out to them. I think it's not KDOC. Anyways, channel 56 in Orange County, California, where they had the wrestling block of the latest shows, whether it was Mid-South, World Class, it doesn't matter. California Championship Wrestling, just a whole bunch of organizations at independent wrestling that you can get normally. So like you, I was told to go out and play a lot more than I did. And I'm glad I got the chance to stay in and watch this history of wrestling that you and I now think of so fondly.
Yes, most definitely. So please, though, do check out the PVDcast, PVDcast.com, as Gerald said, and, wherever you find great podcasts. And every Monday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I do a live broadcast of this week's episode. In fact, here tomorrow night, you can check out my discussion with Billy Van Zant, who playwright extraordinaire, television producer, actor, and author. He's got a new book out, so he stops by and chats with me. So I'll be playing that at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time through the Facebook page of the PVDcast, which is at PVDcast.
Well, there you go. Check it out, indeed. Always a great time at the PVDcast, wherever you get your podcasts, or stop by the PVDcast on Facebook or pvdcast.com. If only we had YouTube when we were younger. That's all I'll say.
I don't know. I think that might have been bad, because my silly rear end would have been making stupid like homemade wrestling videos and putting them up on YouTube. So I don't know. I don't know.
Well, I would have been able to save a lot of money, that's for sure, instead of going out and buying all those Japanese wrestling tapes. But need I digress? Once again, it's John Orlando from the PVDcast. You got to go ahead and check out everything that he's doing today at the PVDcast. And John, I just cannot thank you enough for always a great wrestling conversation. I hope you'll return, because I want to hear your thoughts on exactly everything that's going on within the business. I always like always value your insight. Always appreciate everything that you do on your shows, and I welcome you back to the show anytime.
Hey, anytime you let me know, Gerald, I'll be happy to stop on.
You got it, my friend. I appreciate it once again for being part of the Pop